That pool is an eyesore and you're going to drain it today. President Karen screams at my fence, waving a violation notice. Her perfectly manicured nails are clutching that paper like it's a weapon, her face red with fury as she points at my beautiful backyard oasis. But what Karen doesn't know is this. I'm not just some retiree with a backyard pool. I'm Robert Hayes, and I own the water company that supplies her entire neighborhood. Every drop of water in her precious landscaping, her morning shower, her kitchen sink, even the water that fills her own swimming pool, all comes through my pipes. The irony is about to become delicious. She's standing there demanding I drain my pool while completely ignorant that I control every gallon of water flowing into her $750,000 mansion. And she's about to learn the hard way why you never, ever mess with a man who controls the water. I'm Robert Hayes. I'm 64 years old and recently retired after owning Hayes Water Solutions for 35 years. Throughout my career, I built water treatment plants, designed irrigation systems, and supplied clean water to over 200 communities across 3 states. I didn't start with money or connections. Back in 1987, I was a broke ex-military engineer with a single water truck and a dream to provide clean water to rural communities that big companies ignored. Those early days were brutal. I'd drive that beat-up truck from farm to farm, filling water tanks for families whose wells had run dry, sleeping in truck stops, eating gas station sandwiches, reinvesting every penny back into the business. But I understood something that the big corporations didn't. Water isn't just a commodity, it's life itself. And people will pay anything for reliable, clean water delivered with respect and professionalism. The breakthrough came in 1995 when I won the contract to supply water to Millerville, a town of 3,000 people whose municipal system had failed. The previous contractor had cut corners, delivered contaminated water, and nearly poisoned half the town. I rebuilt their entire distribution network from scratch, installed state-of-the-art filtration systems, and provided the cleanest water they'd ever tasted. Word spread like wildfire. Within 5 years, I was supplying water to 50 communities. Within 10 years, I had built 3 water treatment plants and employed 200 people. By 2010, Hayes Water Solutions was the largest independent water supplier in the tri-state area. But success never went to my head. I remembered those early days of desperation, and I made sure every customer got the same attention I'd given that first farmer whose well had run dry. But in 2019, I decided to sell the operational business to my son, Michael, and enjoy a quiet retirement. Michael had grown up in the water business, understood the technology, and shared my commitment to service excellence. The transition was smooth, with one important detail. I retained ownership of the infrastructure, the plants, the distribution networks, the storage facilities, all still mine. Michael runs the day-to-day operations, but I own the pipes that carry water to thousands of homes across 3 states. I bought my dream house in Sunny Creek Estates, a beautiful neighborhood with 180 homes nestled around a small lake. The house itself was perfect. 4,500 square feet of craftsman-style architecture, with vaulted ceilings, hardwood floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the backyard. But the backyard was what sold me. A half-acre of gently sloping lawn, surrounded by mature oak trees, with southern exposure perfect for a pool. I immediately knew what I wanted. The ultimate retirement paradise. Not just any pool, but a custom-designed masterpiece that would showcase everything I'd learned about water systems during 35 years in the business. I spent 6 months planning that pool with the same attention to detail I'd used for municipal water systems. The final design was spectacular. A 40-foot infinity pool with an integrated spa, natural stone waterfall, underwater LED lighting, and a swim-up bar with built-in stools. The deck was travertine stone imported from Italy, surrounded by tropical landscaping that made you feel like you were at a 5-star resort. But here's what made my pool truly special. I used my decades of water expertise to create the most efficient system ever built. Rainwater collection tanks captured and filtered precipitation for pool use. Gray water recycling systems processed and reused water from the house. Advanced filtration eliminated the need for harsh chemicals. The entire system was controlled by smart automation that optimized every aspect of water usage. The result was incredible. A pool twice the size of normal residential pools that actually used 60% less water than standard systems. Every aspect was designed by someone who understood water better than anyone in the state. The total investment was $85,000, but it was worth every penny for the engineering marvel I'd created. When the pool was finally complete, the inaugural party was legendary. I invited the entire neighborhood for a barbecue and pool party. Families came with their kids, elderly couples brought lawn chairs, and everyone was amazed by the waterfall, the lighting, and the crystal clear water. That first summer was magical. My pool became the unofficial community gathering place for weekend barbecues, kids' birthday parties, and evening cocktail hours. What people didn't know was my business connection to their daily lives. When I sold Hayes Water Solutions operations to Michael, I retained ownership of the infrastructure that supplied water to 47 different communities, including Sunny Creek Estates. This wasn't unusual in the water industry. Many founders retain ownership of critical infrastructure while selling operations. For residents, nothing changes. They get the same reliable water service. But legally and financially, I controlled every drop of water flowing into their homes. During my first year in Sunny Creek Estates, there was no HOA. The neighborhood was peaceful, well-maintained, and friendly. People took pride in their homes without needing rules and fines. Children played safely in the quiet streets while parents watched from front porches. My pool was the crown jewel of this community spirit, a gathering place where relationships were built and memories were made. Everything changed in late 2020 when Karen Blackstone purchased the most expensive house in the neighborhood for $750,000. The woman worked in commercial real estate and had very strong opinions about property values and neighborhood standards. From day one, she announced her intention to improve our community, though nobody had asked for improvements. Karen's house was the architectural opposite of mine. Ultra-modern, all sharp angles and glass, painted in cold grays and whites that looked more like a commercial building than a family home. She immediately hired the most expensive landscaping company in the city to install a sterile garden of geometric hedges and imported stones. No flowers, no personality, just calculated elegance designed to make a statement about wealth and taste. The first red flag was Karen's introductory visit to my house 3 days after moving in. She didn't bring cookies or a welcome gift like normal neighbors. Instead, she brought a clipboard and spent 20 minutes walking around my backyard, taking notes and photos of my pool from every angle. "This is quite an impressive water feature," she said, but her tone suggested she was filing information rather than offering compliments. Karen's next move was organizing what she called neighborhood familiarization meetings. She went door to door with a survey asking residents about their concerns and improvement priorities. The questions were leading and manipulative. Are you concerned about property values declining due to inconsistent standards? Do you feel certain homes negatively impact the neighborhood's prestige? The survey results, presented at Karen's first community meeting, painted a picture of widespread concern about declining standards and property value threats. Of course, Karen was the only one who had seen the actual responses, and her interpretation focused heavily on water feature concerns and excessive individual modifications. She had prepared a PowerPoint presentation with photos of various neighborhood homes, including multiple shots of my pool from different angles. While some water features can enhance property values, she explained, oversized installations can create maintenance concerns, safety issues, and resource consumption problems that affect the entire community. When I raised my hand to respond, Karen reluctantly recognized me. "I'd like to clarify something about water usage," I began. "My pool actually uses advanced conservation technology that reduces consumption by 60% compared to standard pools." "Mr. Hayes, we appreciate your input," Karen interrupted, "but individual claims about efficiency should be independently verified before being used to justify non-standard installations." The room buzzed with murmurs as neighbors realized Karen was essentially calling me a liar. But I had spent 35 years in water systems engineering and recognized amateur hour when I heard it. Karen didn't understand the first thing about water infrastructure, but she was positioning herself as an expert to support her predetermined agenda. Karen's next step was proposing the establishment of a formal HOA. Without proper governance, she warned, our neighborhood will become a patchwork of individual decisions that collectively harm everyone's property values. She used fear tactics about neighborhoods that had lost their character due to uncontrolled modifications. The final vote was 89 in favor, 47 opposed, with 44 abstentions. Karen had successfully convinced a majority that formal management was essential for protecting their investments. Once the HOA was established, Karen declared herself president without opposition. Karen's first official action was creating the Sunny Creek Estates Community Standards Manual, a 52-page document that covered everything from paint color approval processes to landscaping requirements to recreational facility guidelines. The pool regulations were obviously written with mine specifically in mind. Water features exceeding 500 square feet require special approval. Noise-generating equipment must be professionally certified below 45 decibels. All pool lighting must use warm white bulbs only. Waterfall features are considered non-essential decorative elements subject to seasonal restrictions. My pool was 800 square feet, had a waterfall feature, used blue accent lighting, and had never been certified for noise levels. Karen had essentially outlawed my existing installation through retroactive regulations. The first violation notice arrived just 2 weeks after the manual was distributed. Violation: pool exceeds permitted square footage by 300 square feet. Deadline: 30 days. Fine: $500. The paperwork requirements were deliberately burdensome. Engineering reports cost $2,000. Noise certification required hiring acoustic consultants for $1,500. The second violation arrived while I was still gathering documentation for the first one. Violation: non-compliant lighting creates visual disturbance. Deadline: 15 days. Fine: $750. The third violation was even more outrageous. Violation: waterfall feature generates noise exceeding community standards. Deadline: 10 days. Fine: $1,000. But Karen's ultimate weapon was deployed in the fourth violation notice. Violation: continued operation of non-compliant water feature during community drought conditions. Required action: immediate cessation of all water usage, including pool filling, waterfall operation, and spa functionality. Deadline: 72 hours. Fine: does, $1 million. This was when I realized Karen wasn't just enforcing standards. She was conducting personal warfare. There were no official drought conditions in our area, no water restrictions from municipal authorities, and no emergency justifying the elimination of my pool's operation. Karen had fabricated a crisis to justify demands that would force me to abandon my $85,000 investment. After that final violation notice demanding I drain my pool, I spent the evening in my home office reviewing documents. 35 years in the water business had taught me the importance of understanding every contract, every regulation, and every legal relationship. I pulled out the Hayes Water Solutions files, municipal agreements, and infrastructure ownership documents. What I found was even more powerful than I'd remembered. When I sold the operational business to Michael, I retained ownership of not just the water treatment plant, but the entire distribution network serving this region. The pipes running under Karen Street, the pumping station that maintains her water pressure, the storage tanks that ensure 24-hour supply, all mine. More importantly, I discovered that Sunny Creek Estates had a unique water situation. Unlike most developments that connect to municipal systems, our neighborhood was served by a private water contract. The original developer had signed a 50-year exclusive agreement with Hayes Water Solutions. Residents paid their bills to the municipal authority, but the actual water supply came through my infrastructure. This meant I wasn't just another customer, I was the supplier. And while I couldn't arbitrarily cut off water service, I had significant leverage in any disputes about water usage, conservation, or community policies affecting my business interests. I called my attorney, David Chen, who had handled water rights cases for 20 years. After reviewing the documents, he smiled. "Robert, you're not just a homeowner in this dispute. You're a utility provider being harassed by a customer. That changes everything about your legal position. David explained that utility companies have strong protections against harassment from customer organizations. Homeowners associations cannot interfere with utility operations, demand usage restrictions beyond municipal requirements, or create regulations that impair service delivery. Karen's drought restrictions and pool drainage demands potentially violated these protections. Meanwhile, Karen was escalating her campaign. She organized a community water conservation meeting where she presented charts showing neighborhood water usage. She claimed my pool was depleting resources and demanded immediate action to address this selfish waste. When residents asked for actual usage data, Karen admitted she didn't have specific numbers, but insisted, "Common sense shows that large pools use excessive water." I requested to present my side at the next meeting. My presentation was simple, actual data. I showed my water bills proving my pool used less water than most neighborhood lawns. I explained the recycling systems, rainwater collection, and efficiency features. But the most shocking revelation came when Mrs. Patterson asked about drought restrictions. I explained that there were no official drought restrictions in our area. Karen had invented the water emergency. The room fell silent. Karen's face turned red as residents realized she had fabricated the crisis. But Karen's response was to double down. The next violation notice was her nuclear option. Immediate compliance required. Pool drainage within 72 hours, or legal action will commence. That night, I called Michael at Hayes Water Solutions. "Son, we need to talk about the Sunny Creek Estates account. There's been some confusion about water usage policies, and I think it's time to clarify our position as the service provider." After Karen's 72-hour ultimatum to drain my pool, I spent the weekend developing a comprehensive response strategy. This wasn't just about my pool anymore. It was about establishing proper boundaries between community management and utility infrastructure. Karen needed to understand that some fights were bigger than HOA politics, and she was about to learn why water companies don't negotiate with petty tyrants. Saturday morning, I sat in my home office surrounded by 35 years of water industry documentation, contracts, municipal agreements, infrastructure ownership papers, regulatory compliance certificates. Everything meticulously organized in filing cabinets that told the story of building a water empire from nothing. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen was demanding I drain my pool to conserve water while threatening the man who controlled her water supply. I pulled out the Hayes Water Solutions Master Agreement that governed our regional operations. The document was 200 pages of legal language that established our exclusive rights to supply water to 47 communities across 3 counties. Most customers never saw these agreements. They just turned on their taps and expected water to flow. But buried in Section 12.7 was language that would change everything. Provider retains absolute discretion over service interruptions required for system maintenance, safety inspections, or response to customer complaints regarding service quality or system integrity. The beauty of that clause was its breadth. Customer complaints about excessive usage, system strain, or conservation emergencies all fell under our authority to investigate, and investigations required comprehensive testing that could take days or weeks, depending on the complexity of reported problems. I spent Saturday afternoon reviewing every interaction with Karen, documenting her specific claims about water usage, pressure problems, and conservation emergencies. She had given me a paper trail of customer complaints that legally required professional investigation. The water company couldn't ignore safety concerns reported by community representatives. That would violate our regulatory obligations. Sunday morning, I called Michael at his home. "Son, we need to discuss some service quality issues reported in the Sunny Creek Estates area. I've been receiving complaints from the HOA president about pressure irregularities and conservation emergencies that require immediate attention." Michael laughed when I explained the situation in detail. "Dad, let me understand this correctly. The HOA president is demanding you waste thousands of gallons by draining your efficient pool system, while claiming to support water conservation." "That's exactly right. And she's filed formal complaints with the community about water pressure problems and system strain that we're legally obligated to investigate. What kind of investigation are we talking about? The kind that ensures absolute system safety and addresses every concern she's raised about water infrastructure reliability. Monday morning, I drove to the Hayes Water Solutions headquarters for a strategy meeting with Michael and our operations manager, Steve Rodriguez. The building was a testament to 35 years of growth, a modern facility housing laboratories, engineering departments, customer service centers, and dispatch operations that coordinated water delivery to 300,000 people daily. Steve had prepared detailed maps of the Sunny Creek Estate service area, showing every pipe, valve, connection point, and distribution node. Mr. Hayes, this neighborhood is entirely dependent on our infrastructure. Single main supply line, secondary distribution network, emergency backup connections, everything flows through our controlled systems. Michael pointed to the main shutoff valve location. If we need to perform comprehensive safety testing in response to customer complaints, we have significant flexibility about methodology and duration. Emergency protocols don't require advance notice, and planned maintenance only needs 24-hour notification. What constitutes an emergency? I asked. Customer reports of pressure irregularities, water quality concerns, system strain, or safety hazards, Steve replied. When community representatives file complaints about infrastructure problems, we're required to respond immediately to protect public health. And how long do comprehensive safety evaluations typically take? Depends on the complexity of reported problems. Simple pressure tests might take a few hours. But if we're investigating systemic issues like the ones described in these HOA complaints, Steve paused dramatically. Could be several days of detailed analysis. I smiled. Steve, I've been receiving formal complaints from HOA President Karen Blackstone about excessive water pressure causing system waste, infrastructure strain from oversized installations, and conservation emergencies requiring immediate attention. These sound like serious safety concerns that require professional investigation. Absolutely, sir. Customer safety is our top priority, and we can't restore full service until we're certain these reported problems don't represent genuine hazards. Michael was already thinking tactically. Dad, we could start with standard pressure testing, but if we discover irregularities that support the HOA president's complaints, we'd need to expand the investigation. System integrity testing, flow analysis, pressure mapping, whatever's necessary to address her specific concerns. And during this investigation period, service would be temporarily interrupted to ensure accurate testing results. Can't properly evaluate system pressure while customers are drawing water for non-essential purposes. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Karen had spent months documenting water emergencies and system problems that didn't exist. Now she would experience what actual water emergencies looked like when professionals took her complaints seriously. Tuesday morning, Karen called to remind me about the pool drainage deadline. Her voice carried the triumphant tone of someone who believed she had won. Mr. Hayes, you have exactly 24 hours to comply with emergency water conservation requirements. If that pool isn't drained by Wednesday evening, we're filing for injunctive relief and seeking monetary damages for continued violations. Karen, I understand your concerns about water conservation, I replied calmly. In fact, I've been so worried about the infrastructure problems you've described that I contacted Hayes Water Solutions about your reports of pressure irregularities and system strain. What does that have to do with anything? Well, when community representatives file formal complaints about water system safety, utility companies are legally required to investigate. They're sending a technical team to conduct comprehensive testing. I never filed complaints with the water company. Karen, you've spent months documenting concerns about excessive water usage, system strain, pressure problems, and conservation emergencies. I forwarded your reports to the appropriate authorities for professional evaluation. Those weren't formal complaints. I was just expressing neighborhood concerns. The water company doesn't distinguish between formal and informal safety reports. When an HOA president documents infrastructure problems, they investigate thoroughly. Customer safety is their top priority. There was a long pause. What exactly does this investigation involve? Comprehensive system testing to verify the pressure irregularities and usage problems you've identified. They need to temporarily interrupt service during testing to ensure accurate measurements. How long will this take? Hard to say. Depends on what they find. If your reports about system problems are accurate, it could take several days to identify and address all the issues. Robert, you can't punish the entire neighborhood because I'm enforcing community standards. Karen, I'm not punishing anyone. I'm reporting legitimate safety concerns to qualified professionals. Isn't that what responsible community management requires? That evening, I called Steve Rodriguez to coordinate the operation. Steve, we need to schedule emergency system evaluation for Sunny Creek Estates tomorrow morning. The HOA president has filed multiple safety complaints that require immediate investigation. Understood, sir. What's the scope of testing? Comprehensive, pressure integrity, flow analysis, strain assessment, conservation compliance verification. Everything she's raised concerns about. We need to be absolutely thorough. Duration estimate? As long as necessary to address every safety issue she's documented. Could be days if we find the systemic problems she's reported. Copy that. We'll deploy full technical crew with advanced diagnostic equipment. If there are genuine infrastructure problems, we'll identify them. Wednesday morning at exactly 7 a.m., my phone rang. It was Karen, her voice tight with anxiety. Robert, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. Maybe we can work out some kind of compromise about the pool situation. Karen, it's too late for compromises. You've filed safety complaints with the water company, and they're legally obligated to investigate. The technical team is already en route. Can't you call them off? Karen, I'm just a customer like you. Once safety investigations begin, only the completion of thorough testing can restore normal service. How long did you say this would take? Depends entirely on what they find. You've documented serious infrastructure problems. They have to investigate thoroughly. At 10 a.m., 2 Hayes Water Solutions trucks arrived in Sunny Creek Estates. Steve Rodriguez and his 4-person technical crew began emergency system evaluation in response to customer reports of pressure irregularities and conservation emergencies. The trucks were equipped with sophisticated testing equipment, computers for data analysis, and communication gear for coordinating with central dispatch. Steve's team started at the main distribution point, installing pressure monitoring equipment and flow measurement devices. The testing protocol required temporary service interruption to establish baseline measurements without interference from customer usage patterns. Translation: they turned off the water to get accurate readings. The water stopped flowing at 10:15 a.m. Steve's crew worked methodically through the distribution network, testing pressure at every connection point, measuring flow rates through different pipe sections, and documenting irregularities that supported Karen's reported concerns. Each test required 30 to 45 minutes of analysis, followed by equipment relocation and recalibration for the next measurement point. By 11 a.m., curious neighbors were gathering in the street. "What's happening with the water?" asked Jennifer Martinez, who had been loading her dishwasher when the flow stopped. "Routine safety inspection," Steve explained professionally. "We received reports of pressure problems and system irregularities that require investigation. Can't restore service until we're certain everything meets safety standards." "How long will this take?" asked David Park. "Depends what we find, sir. Could be a few hours, could be longer. Safety regulations don't allow us to rush these evaluations." "Who reported these problems?" Jennifer asked. Steve consulted his clipboard. HOA President Karen Blackstone filed multiple complaints about pressure irregularities, excessive usage creating system strain, and conservation emergencies. We're responding to her documented concerns. The neighbors exchanged glances. Karen's obsession with my pool was well known, but now her complaints were affecting everyone. By noon, the situation had escalated from inconvenience to crisis. Without water, toilets couldn't flush, showers couldn't operate, and lunch preparation was impossible. The community pool and recreation center were forced to close. Parents with small children were particularly frustrated. No water for bottles, no ability to clean up messes, no functioning bathrooms. Karen appeared at the main testing site around 12:30 p.m., demanding immediate restoration. Her perfectly styled hair was already showing signs of stress, and her usual commanding presence had been replaced by visible anxiety. "This is ridiculous. There's nothing wrong with the water system." Steve consulted his clipboard professionally. "Ma'am, we're responding to formal complaints filed by HOA President Karen Blackstone regarding pressure irregularities, system strain, and conservation emergencies. Are you saying these reports were inaccurate?" I was just expressing concerns about excessive usage, not reporting system failures. Ma'am, when community officials document infrastructure problems, we're legally required to investigate. We can't ignore safety concerns from neighborhood representatives. How long will this take? We're conducting comprehensive evaluation of every issue mentioned in your reports: pressure testing, flow analysis, strain assessment, emergency response verification. Could be several more hours, maybe longer, depending on what we discover. This is harassment. Ma'am, this is standard safety protocol. When customers report systemic problems, we investigate thoroughly. Your concerns about excessive pressure, infrastructure strain, and conservation emergencies require professional evaluation. By 1 p.m., the crisis was escalating beyond inconvenience into genuine hardship. Mrs. Henderson, an 84-year-old diabetic, couldn't prepare her insulin injection properly without clean water. The Rodriguez family's newborn needed formula, but they couldn't safely mix it without sterile water. Professional families were missing important work calls because they couldn't shower or present themselves properly for video conferences. The neighborhood's carefully maintained facade of suburban perfection was crumbling as residents were forced to confront their complete dependence on a service they had always taken for granted. Some families loaded into cars to find public restrooms. Others drove to relatives' homes for basic hygiene needs. The local gym reported being overwhelmed by Sunny Creek residents desperate for shower facilities. By 2 p.m., angry neighbors were gathering around Karen's house. The woman who had spent months crusading for water conservation was now facing a neighborhood without any water at all. The irony was delicious, but the anger was very real. "Karen, what did you do?" demanded Tom Wilson, holding his crying toddler who needed a diaper change but couldn't be properly cleaned. "I didn't do anything. This is Robert's revenge for the pool violations." "Lady, I don't care about your pool obsession," snapped Sarah Kim. "My elderly mother needs water for her medications, and you caused this crisis." "I didn't cause anything. I was just enforcing community standards." By lying about water emergencies, David Chen had obviously done some research. "I called the Municipal Water Authority. There are no drought restrictions, no conservation emergencies, and no pressure problems in our area. You made it all up." The crowd was growing larger and angrier as word spread through social media and neighborhood text groups. Parents who couldn't prepare baby formula, elderly residents who needed water for medications, and working professionals who couldn't shower before important meetings all focused their fury on the woman who had fabricated the crisis that triggered the investigation. Margaret Sullivan, the retired teacher who had initially supported Karen's community standards, stepped forward with trembling voice. "Karen, I haven't been able to take my blood pressure medication for hours because I can't swallow pills without water. My doctor says missing doses could cause serious health problems. Did you think about people like me when you started this vendetta against Robert?" The emotional impact was devastating. Karen's face went white as she realized the human cost of her vindictive campaign. This wasn't about property values or community standards. This was about people's basic survival needs. Jennifer Martinez, holding her fussy infant, added her voice to the growing chorus of complaints. "My baby needs clean water for formula. We can't even sterilize bottles properly. This isn't community management. This is reckless endangerment." "Karen, you need to fix this immediately," demanded David Park, who had missed a crucial client presentation because he couldn't shower or shave. "Call whoever you need to call, but get our water restored now." "I can't fix it," Karen protested desperately. "Robert controls the water company. He's punishing all of you because I tried to enforce pool regulations." "You mean because you lied about emergencies and made up fake conservation crises?" Tom Wilson's voice was rising dangerously. "My kid has been crying for 2 hours because I can't give him a proper bath. This is your fault, not Robert's." The crowd pressed closer, and for the first time in months, Karen looked genuinely afraid. She had spent so long wielding authority through rules and fines that she'd forgotten what real consequences felt like. Now she was facing 180 families whose lives had been disrupted by her fabricated emergency. By 3 p.m., the situation had reached a breaking point. Karen was trapped in her house while an increasingly hostile crowd gathered in her front yard. Her manufactured water emergency had become a real water crisis, and 180 families were holding her personally responsible for their suffering. Local businesses were feeling the economic impact. Restaurants near Sunny Creek Estates reported being overwhelmed by families who couldn't cook at home. Hotel lobbies became temporary gathering spaces for residents seeking bathroom facilities. The community center, normally peaceful during weekday afternoons, was packed with frustrated neighbors sharing stories of hardship and plotting collective action against their HOA president. Steve Rodriguez, monitoring the situation from his command post, received increasingly desperate calls from residents. But his response was always the same. "We understand your frustration, but we can't restore service until we've completed investigation of the safety concerns reported by your HOA president. Customer safety is our top priority." Around 4 p.m., Karen made a desperate attempt to contact municipal authorities, county supervisors, and even the State Utility Commission. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Officials explaining that Hayes Water Solutions was conducting legitimate safety investigations in response to her documented complaints, and there was no legal mechanism to interfere with proper safety protocols. Ms. Blackstone, the State Utility Commissioner's office, explained patiently, "You've filed multiple reports about infrastructure problems that require professional evaluation. The utility company is legally obligated to investigate thoroughly before restoring full service." "I didn't mean for this to happen," Karen protested. "Ma'am, when community officials document safety concerns, utility companies must respond appropriately. There's no mechanism for us to override legitimate safety investigations." By 5 p.m., Karen was facing the complete collapse of her authority and credibility. The neighbors who had once supported her community standards were now openly discussing her removal from office. Petition sheets were circulating, demanding her immediate resignation. Someone had started a Facebook group called Recall Karen Blackstone that gained 47 members in the first hour. Around 6 p.m., Karen appeared at my door, looking completely defeated. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, her confident demeanor had been replaced by visible desperation, and her hands were visibly shaking. This was a woman who had discovered that real power couldn't be fabricated through bureaucratic harassment. "Robert, please, call off the water company. The neighborhood is furious, people are threatening to sue me, and I can't fix this situation." "Karen, I can't call off a legitimate safety inspection. Hayes Water Solutions has to complete their evaluation of the problems you reported." "You know this isn't really about safety? This is revenge." "Is it? You spent months claiming there were water pressure problems, usage emergencies, and conservation crises. The water company is simply investigating your reports. Isn't this what you wanted? Professional oversight of water usage. You're destroying the entire neighborhood. No, Karen. You're discovering what actually happens when you interfere with essential services. Water companies take safety very seriously. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that some fights are bigger than HOA politics. When you attack someone's property rights, you might be attacking more than you realize. I'll cancel the pool violations. I'll stop the enforcement. Just please end this. That's a start. But the water company needs to complete their investigation. You reported serious safety concerns. They can't just ignore those reports. Karen spent the next hour frantically calling every contact she could think of. City council members, county supervisors, state representatives. But the response was always the same. Hayes Water Solutions was conducting legitimate safety evaluations that couldn't be interrupted by political pressure. By 7 p.m., Karen returned with a handwritten statement that her attorney had helped draft over the phone. HOA President Karen Blackstone hereby withdraws all complaints filed with Hayes Water Solutions and regarding water pressure, usage emergencies, and system safety concerns. These reports were filed in error and do not reflect actual conditions in Sunny Creek Estates. I reviewed the statement carefully. This is good, Karen, but you also need to formally rescind all pool-related violations and provide written guarantee that no future enforcement actions will target my property. Fine, whatever you want. Just please end this nightmare. I'll forward your statement to Hayes Water Solutions immediately. I called Steve Rodriguez. Steve, we just received formal withdrawal of all complaints from the HOA president. She's admitted the reports were filed in error, and there are no actual safety concerns. Excellent, sir. That changes everything. If there are no genuine safety issues, we can wrap up testing much faster. How much faster? Well, if the customer complaints were unfounded, we could probably restore full service by this evening. That would be appreciated, Steve. At 8 p.m., Hayes Water Solutions announced through loudspeakers that testing was complete and no safety issues had been found. Water service would be restored immediately. The neighborhood erupted in celebration as the first drops began flowing from taps and showers. Children cheered, adults hugged their neighbors, and everyone celebrated like they'd been rescued from a genuine disaster. The most important lesson that emerged from this experience was elegantly simple. Never pick a fight with someone who controls essential services. Authority derived from bureaucratic positions has very real limitations when it conflicts with actual infrastructure management and genuine expertise. The next morning brought a completely different atmosphere to Sunny Creek Estates. As I walked out to get my newspaper, I found my neighbor David Park working in his garden and stopped to chat. The relief on his face was palpable. Water was flowing again, and life was returning to normal. Robert, I hope yesterday wasn't too difficult for your family, I said. It was educational, he replied with a wry smile. I never realized how dependent we are on water service, or how seriously utility companies take safety reports. That was the longest day of my life. Yes, water companies have strict protocols when customers report potential hazards. Karen learned that lesson the hard way. Half the neighborhood is calling for her resignation. There's already a petition circulating to remove her as HOA President. As David spoke, I could see other neighbors beginning their morning routines with obvious gratitude. Simple actions like watering gardens, filling coffee makers, and taking showers had new meaning after yesterday's crisis. The sound of running water, normally background noise, was now a symphony of relief. That evening, Margaret Sullivan knocked on my door. The elderly retired teacher looked apologetic and slightly embarrassed. Robert, I owe you a sincere apology. When Karen started complaining about your pool, I thought she had valid concerns about conservation. I never realized she was making up emergencies and fabricating crises. Margaret, conservation is genuinely important, but conservation means using water efficiently, not banning water features that already use efficient systems. Your pool really uses less water than most lawns? Significantly less. The recycling systems, rainwater collection, and efficient filtration make it one of the most conservative water features in the neighborhood. The irony is that Karen was attacking the most water-efficient installation in Sunny Creek Estates. I feel foolish for supporting Karen's restrictions without understanding the technical details. Over the following days, similar conversations happened throughout the neighborhood. Residents who had supported Karen's conservation efforts were now approaching me with apologies and newfound appreciation for actual water management versus fabricated emergencies. The crisis had educated everyone about the difference between genuine conservation and bureaucratic harassment. Jennifer Martinez stopped by on Thursday with her baby. Robert, I wanted to thank you for handling this situation with such restraint. When my baby couldn't get clean water for formula, I was terrified. But you could have made this much worse for Karen. Jennifer, the goal was never to hurt anyone. It was to demonstrate that essential services deserve respect and understanding. Tom Wilson, who had been one of Karen's loudest critics during the water crisis, approached me during my evening walk. Robert, I have to ask, did you plan this whole thing? Tom, Hayes Water Solutions conducted a completely legitimate safety inspection in response to customer complaints. Everything they did was professional and necessary. But the timing. Karen spent months documenting water emergencies and infrastructure problems. The utility company was legally obligated to investigate those reports thoroughly. Tom nodded slowly. Well, She won't be making fake emergency reports anymore. The whole neighborhood learned what real water emergencies look like. Over the following weeks, the neighborhood dynamic shifted dramatically. The water crisis had revealed the difference between actual community management and personal vendettas disguised as policy enforcement. Residents began questioning other HOA regulations and demanding transparency about enforcement decisions. Karen tried to restore her authority, but found little support. Her credibility had evaporated along with the neighborhood's water supply. At the next HOA meeting, attendance was the highest in the community's history. Residents who had never participated in governance were now engaged in asking hard questions. "I want to understand," said Mrs. Patterson, "how our HOA president can file false emergency reports that shut off our water for an entire day. What oversight exists to prevent this from happening again?" Karen attempted damage control. "The water situation was an unfortunate misunderstanding. I was simply trying to address legitimate conservation concerns." By making up emergencies, David Chen had done his homework. "I've researched every claim you made about drought conditions, conservation requirements, and infrastructure problems. None of it was true." The meeting became a referendum on Karen's leadership. Residents voted to revise the Community Standards Manual, removing most of the arbitrary restrictions she had created. The new guidelines focused on genuine community needs rather than personal preferences and power projection. The pool regulations were completely rewritten. Water features using efficient systems and conservation technology are encouraged as examples of responsible resource management. My pool went from being a violation to being the neighborhood standard for environmental consciousness. More importantly, new oversight mechanisms were established. No single board member could unilaterally file complaints with utility companies or other authorities. All enforcement actions require documentation of actual problems rather than subjective concerns, and residents gained the right to challenge any enforcement decision through a transparent appeal process. Karen remained as HOA president, but her approach changed completely. The woman who had once wielded authority through intimidation and bureaucratic harassment now consulted with residents before creating regulations and focused on building consensus rather than imposing arbitrary standards. The transformation was remarkable to witness. Karen began attending community water conservation workshops to understand actual conservation principles rather than inventing fake emergencies. She learned about efficient irrigation systems, rainwater harvesting, and smart water management. The technical knowledge she should have acquired before attacking my pool. In September, 3 months after the water crisis, Karen approached me with an unexpected request. "Robert, I want to apologize formally and publicly. I let my concerns about property management override common sense and professional expertise. Your pool never was a problem. I was the problem." "Karen, I appreciate that acknowledgement. Water management is complex, and it's easy to make assumptions without understanding the technical details. Could I ask you something? When the water company was doing their testing, were you—" "Karen, Hayes Water Solutions conducted a completely legitimate safety inspection in response to customer complaints. Everything they did was professional, necessary, and thorough. They take customer safety reports very seriously." She nodded, understanding that some questions were better left unasked. "I've learned something important about leadership. Real authority comes from expertise and service, not from rules and penalties." That's a valuable lesson for any community leader. 2 months later, Karen surprised everyone by asking for my advice about installing a pool of her own. "I want something efficient like yours," she said. "Could you recommend the right systems and conservation technology?" The irony was delicious, but I helped her design a beautiful, water-efficient pool that incorporated the latest conservation technology. When it was completed, Karen's pool became the second-best water feature in the neighborhood, and she made sure everyone understood the sophisticated engineering that made it environmentally responsible. Our relationship evolved from conflict to mutual respect. Every morning, when Karen watered her garden with recycled gray water from her efficient pool system, she would give a small wave toward my pool, a gentle reminder that sometimes the biggest conflicts lead to the most important lessons about expertise, respect, and the difference between real authority and fabricated power. The neighborhood itself was transformed by the experience. Residents became more engaged in community governance, more skeptical of arbitrary regulations, and more appreciative of the essential services that made their comfortable lives possible. The water crisis had been a day of inconvenience, but it provided years of improved community management. Children playing in both pools during summer gatherings would never know about the bureaucratic war that nearly destroyed their favorite swimming spots. They just knew that Mr. Hayes and Mrs. Blackstone both had amazing pools with cool waterfalls and underwater lights, and that somehow the adults had figured out how to make them work together. But the adults remembered. They remembered the day when fabricated emergencies became real emergencies, when arbitrary authority confronted actual infrastructure control, and when community harmony was restored through a demonstration of who really held power over the systems that made their lives possible. Some people think power comes from titles and rule books, but real power comes from understanding the systems that make communities function. When someone threatens what you've built, sometimes the best response is to remind them how much they depend on systems they don't control. If you're facing HOA harassment, document everything, understand your rights, and remember that community management has limits, especially when it conflicts with essential services that keep neighborhoods running. Hit that subscribe button for more stories about neighbors who learned not to mess with the wrong person. Remember, sometimes the quiet neighbor with the nice backyard has more power than the loudest person at the meeting. You just never know who really controls the infrastructure.